So hi there again, my darling humanoids, androids, reptiloids, asteroids, or whatever way you like to identify yourself. Once again, it's me. So we have already spoken about one brilliant concept, which is astrology, in our last video, as always. Now let's talk about a different, very commonly used concept of numerology, which I promise it all links together into one thing, along with the traditional medicine, with the yoga, with everything that I'm trying to pass on here. So at their core, all of these practices that I discuss on this channel in general relate back to psychosemiotics. Hence, once again, I made that video as well, which, if you haven't watched that, psychosemiotics is essentially how the human brain assigns meaning to certain situations, events, stimuli in the exterior world. So numerology as a concept is probably one of the simplest and most core examples of psychosemiotics. So just like with astrology, but in a bit more of a structured manner this time, I am going to first of all give you the initial definitions, the main core concepts, and then the practical applications of using numerology in your everyday life for self-improvement. And later on, we're also probably going to apply it in the more spiritual practices that I'm going to be discussing here. So first of all, numerology is based on the prime numbers that we all know about. They go from 1 to 9. And essentially, the way that it is typically explained, how the meanings and the attributes of the numbers have gained a certain symbolism, forms from the way that matter forms in human perception. And it is all closely interlinked also with the dimensionality of nature and dimensionality of perception and existence as a whole. So trigger warning, first of all, although I hope that if you're on this channel, you're open to spiritual concepts anyway, since you're watching this. But in case you're not, I am going to use spiritual language and including religious language. That doesn't mean that I attribute some religion with having been the originator of this practice or with having the right attitude towards this practice. So if I refer to any specific spiritual concept that is attributed to a particular religion or nationality, I purely do so for the sake of convenience, just because that is how it is known on the media the most. But as with all of these concepts, they have formed all over the world in all of the cultures. So it really doesn't matter what culture you come from. One way or another, there is going to be some kind of circumstance or some kind of belief in your own culture of origin, in your own ancestry, that in some way relates to all of these things. So I'm just going to grab from everything and bring it all together. So the numbers themselves, right? And the attributes. Let's start with obviously 0. 0, nothingness yet infinity. It is the non-dual duality of what everything is. It is nothing and everything in the nothing. It is the matrix, as some people describe it. So it is the origin, but not the point of origin. It is the envelopment, the container of the origin point, which is 1. So the 0 is the matrix in the sense of the mother. It is kind of the womb space of everything else that comes through in it. And hence it is hollow. It is the 0, but it is also everything, for it is the birthing place of everything. And that is why also 0 is closely associated in different traditions to feminine energy, to the vulva, or to the yoni, as some like to call it, whatever way you like to call it. Just honestly, it doesn't matter, it ain't that deep. But yeah, basically 0, mom. It's just mom vibes, yeah? But so when you have nothing, it is kind of dead. Yeah, there's nothing going on. Everything is going on, but nothing is going on. There's no order, there's nothing, like, there's no direction, and it just kind of gets boring when there's nothing happening. So that is where the 1 emerges. So something gets created. It is like, yeah, okay, I'm bored of just like existing in absolute total chaos as nothingness. Let me just like exist as like a concept, as like a singular thing, as an energy, as some like to attribute energy to the number 1 and to numbers in general. So 1 is typically attributed the masculine principle, the lingam, as some call it. So 1 is also what symbolizes movement. It is a point in space. It is specific. It is present. It exists. It is an energy. But then just being one in this enveloping everythingness and nothingness at the same time is also kind of dead, yeah? So that is why we get the two, to balance out the one. Because the one, it is still on its own, it is still in isolation. There is nothing going on because there is nothing to reflect upon. And that is where the reflection, the two, comes in. So where two means balance, harmony, but it also can mean disbalance. The concept of duality from Buddhism, for example, or from literally any philosophy pretty much. The dual nature of reality, the dual nature of perception, the good and the bad, the yes and the no, blah, 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 blah. So duality is what a lot of the media perception also functions on. So that this is why we can bring in the concept of dimensionality, right? So if we think of dimensionality in the sense of perception, we have the first dimension, you could say, but we don't really, as humans, we don't really use the first dimension for anything that much. But if you think about 2D, yeah, 2D is all of the media pretty much that we have, that we consume at the moment. And what happens in the media, like on the internet, on TV, things like that, there's usually duality. There's usually the good guys, the bad guys. There's the right political party and the left political party, or whatever, or like the good political party and the bad political party. Like even in the countries where there's like a lot of political parties competing, there's usually like one or the other popular one. So this duality as a principle is very, very triggering. It is literally what the concept of triggering comes from, is duality, that, oh, it's not neutral, like there's not just one opinion, but there's this other opinion, let me counteract it. But it is also what allows us to not go off on the deep end with just being one and just being hyper focused on the one thing, because what if you hyper focus on the wrong thing? Then that is a waste of energy. And yeah, and then what's the point of creating that energy if you're just going to waste it? But so as conscious and intellectual human beings, we can also perceive reality in 3D, in 3 dimensions. So that is what creates the triangle. We went from the dot, well, from the nothing to the dot to the line to now the triangle, where although yes, in 2D media there is the this and that, in physical reality most of us understand that there is always a middle ground. There's always like a third way to go about things. There's always a compromise. And there is also the attributes of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit from Christianity and all of the other religions as well, which is attributed to the number 3, which is the Trinity, once again. So the Trinity is kind of the initial point of balance, the initial point of actually creating the harmony, not just thriving on the two sides, on the chaos of the two sides, but actually finding a compromise between them, finding the truth, you could say, finding that there's no truth is also the truth. And then obviously that is where we can perceive just like physical material matter is in 3D spaces. So technically, yeah, we also do perceive it in 4D. I'm gonna get onto that next. But at the core, in the moment, if you're being present in the very, very second that you're present in right now, we perceive space in 3 dimensions. But so what is the 4th dimension? The 4th dimension is time, where we can measure the change of a certain object, of a certain matter, of a certain thing within space through time. So we can see how things move. You can see how how my hand moves through space and time, because you're able to perceive both. So that is 4 dimensions. So to the stability that the triangle provides, we add another point, we get a square, which is actual proper stability. So the 4 as a number is not just trinity where it's unity. So trinity, once again, is unity, finding the middle ground. 4 is proper stability, is actual grounding. So 4 of anything, like the 4 angles in the square, is a solid base, is a solid agreement, is a structure that is created, that is firm. Because if once again we draw the analogy to our lives as human beings and us perceiving space-time, it is essentially a grounded structure, because it is a physical structure that has been tested through time. And so that is where we get to number 5. And what is the number 5? Once a solid structure is created, once a balance, a harmony has been created and it has been tested through time, once again, the solid structure is actually in place. And once we have a solid structure in place, is when we can create something, build something on top of that solid structure. And that is the number 5. So hence, the number 5 in itself is the symbol of creation, of change, of perspective, of shifting, and hence this whole new age spirituality pop terminology thing is that, like, oh yeah, we're shifting consciousness from 3D to 5D, is that essentially when people live in 3D consciousness, it is them being unable to even prospect through time as to what is going to happen in their life, because they're so focused on what is happening to them in the moment. They're so zoomed in to what is happening to them in the moment that they can't even perceive the fourth dimension, which is the moment in a perspective of time. So that usually happens when a person, for example, exists in an extreme state of fear, where they can only perceive the 3 dimensions of reality that's around them, the physical world that is around them right now, because they're barely holding on to dear life. While when a person is a bit more calm, they can see the perspective of how the 3D, how the physical material world has the potential to develop. And then 5D consciousness is essentially once a person not only can see the potential of where their life as it is, their material being might go, they become aware that actually they're solid enough in their life and their being that they have the choice to create and decide for themselves what will happen in their life, what will happen to them. So this is also why I kind of disagree with this whole like new age spiritual notion of, oh, we're just ascending to 5D, because like, I'm sorry, but artists have always existed. Like, that is literally what humans do. We create stuff, we make tools. That is how we evolve. So it's like, I don't know, I disagree with the spiritual community on this one, and with the self-development community that like, oh, we're getting into the creator economy. Like, the human existence has always been the creator economy. That is what makes us human, is that we make things. We don't just exist in the moment. Like, existing in the moment, at least to my understanding so far, the 3D is not how humans exist. That is how reptiles exist. Even reptiles exist beyond 3D. Reptiles exist in 4D because they're like, through sensing the stimuli outside of them, they're able to react because they understand that, oh yeah, because I can feel like the creature somewhere like walking around, there's potential that I'm going to be attacked, so I'm going to react and I'm going to run away. That is already 4D consciousness. So technically, even like the lizard brain is already in 4D consciousness. It's not 3D consciousness. So I don't know. I find that this whole like notion a bit ridiculous, but either way. So I would say, if anything, humans are shifting from 5D consciousness to like 7D consciousness, or even beyond that. But I'm not going to get into an argument about that just yet. So yeah, 5D consciousness is the ability to create, and then there's the associations with the chakras, all of the frequencies, the energies of 5D, and blah 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 blah. So next, once we have already created something, what happens is we see our creation. So number 6. Number 6 is typically associated to the ego, pride, but also humanity as a concept. So actually, no, I'm not gonna go into like the whole 666 thing, because that's a bit too like getting too much into like the religious connotations, and I can't be bothered. But essentially, the number 6 is associated either with ego or letting go of ego. So it's humanity, but it's also humility at the same time. So it can be egotistical, but it is also the humbling of observing a beautiful creation, for example. That is all number 6. Number 6 is observation, reflection. A lot of very, very beautiful concepts can be associated to number 6, but also, once again, egoism and therefore sin can also be attributed to the number 6. So as I started giving the example of a human life, for example, once we have created something, we start taking pride in our creation. So we get to number 6, at which point, when we're in the frequency or in the state of 6 dimensions, or yeah, I'm just going to call it the frequency, the energy of 60, if we don't get the response that we expect. So having an opinion about your own creation also creates expectations. It also means that you expect that others around you will also react to it in admiration, for example, or in a certain way to what you have created. And that is essentially what the ego is that expecting an outcome from what you have done. And the thing is, humans, a lot of the time, most of the time, we're wrong about our expectations, because we may never know the ultimate truth of how everything is going to unravel unless you're like an ascended master and can see everything happening all at once, at which point you don't even have any expectations because you know that there's nothing to expect because everything has already happened. Anyway, not gonna spiral into that. Essentially, after 6, when we don't get the response that we wanted, when we don't get the reaction that we wanted, it is a humbling experience, which is the number 7. So the 7th dimension is the understanding. It is transpiring, going above the ego. The number 7 is associated with humility, with ascending above our expectations, ascending above this expecting some kind of return on what we have done, on what we have created. And from my understanding, that is also why the number 7 is associated with God, why it is called like God's favorite number or whatever, or why it is also called the lucky number 7, because essentially when you thrive on the energy of 7, it is you not having any expectations and just having trust in the fact that anything that you do will lead to the right circumstances, to the circumstances and events unfolding in your favor, events unfolding in the way that they're supposed to unfold. And resonating at the frequency of number 7 is just having trust in the universe. So that is why I said what I said about my belief being that humanity is actually ascending from 5D to 7D at the moment, where humans are learning to just have trust in what is happening in the world and not thriving in this fearful state. Okay, maybe 4D to 7D, some from 4D to 6D, some from 5D to 7D. That humans are going beyond just like trying to see what happens in the future and trying to do guesswork, to then trying to actually create the future, realizing that they have the potential and the strength to actually create their own reality, to then realizing that actually they're not all powerful and taking so much responsibility and thinking that you're all that you're like this master of reality is too big a burden. And actually there is a bigger story. You're not the only thing that exists in this world. There are so many other circumstances and events that happen around you that all you can really do is just do your best out of humility, out of kindness, out of love, and just trust in the universe that as long as your intentions are pure, everything will happen as it's supposed to happen. Everything always happens for a reason. And so yeah, 7 is just the energy of trust, of belief, of faith. 7, beautiful number, luck. Because when you have belief, when you have faith, that is when you get lucky. And so next, after 7, what do we have? We have number 8. So what is number 8? Number 8 is karma. Because it is karma in the sense of if you have activated all of the numbers activated. I'm speaking, I hope you're understanding where I'm going with this, what I'm trying to convey here. But essentially, if you have activated all of the numbers before that successfully, then the number 8, the karma is going to be good because you have tried to create something out of pure intentions, you have trusted in the universe, and instead of acting on fear, you have realized that you need to just like stay pure, stay loving, and everything will work out. And then in the number 8, you get your dharma. But if you have been acting out of fear, and for example, in the number 7, instead of resonating at the frequency of trust, you were just like doing guesswork and relying on pure luck, for example, while still staying in your ego, then 8 is where you get your karma instead. So 8 is the consequences of events. So for example, living in the 8th dimension of understanding, of conceptualizing the universe, is seeing the potential outcomes of situations and how they relate to your own power, but also the powers of all of the universe and all of the events that are happening around you. So the number 8 is where you transcend beyond just purely relying on luck and on God and the power of the universe or source energy, and where you get into an actual active communication with the source, where you tap into your higher self, you could say, is where you get the number 8. Is that you're able to actually perceive what is good karma, what is bad karma. So what is dharma, what is karma, what is led through higher intentions and what is led through your ego. But also forgive yourself in case you have acted out of ego and realize that you now have the potential to work on the karma that you have created by acting on your ego. So this is where it gets a bit more complicated, but essentially, yeah, all you need to remember is 8 is consequences of events, 8 is consequences of actions. And then the final number, number 9, is the ending, essentially. So, okay, it is not the ending in the sense of like total ending, but it is the last stage before a new cycle, before the rebirth, before we get into the energy of zero again. So the energy of 9 is where we have taken in the consequences of our actions, where we have accepted them, and we either observe ourselves go above and beyond the previous cycle, work on top of it, or we see ourselves descend as a consequence of our previous actions. And essentially, a 9 is the energy of just observation, reflection, realizing that something has come to an end and they need to let go, or they need to analyze and reflect on how you can let go, how can you do better, how can you make better. And so yeah, that is a roundup of all the numbers. Woo! So now let's talk about the actual practical applications of numerology. So the most practical application that I have at least discovered for myself, aside from reading all of the signs and communicating with the higher self, reading tarot cards, for example, and all of these traditional practices, and aside from like astrology and the applications of numerology within astrology and all of that stuff, and then obviously angel numbers, like, you know what, I'm not even going to get into angel numbers. Basically, here's a chart of all the angel numbers in case you haven't come across them yet, but I'm pretty sure everybody has, and that is probably how you discovered this video. But basically, aside from communicating to the universe in such direct manner through numerology, there is also the yearly numerology, which is just a very, very useful tool, which I have discovered for myself through a spiritual teacher of mine, just a really great person, where instead of sticking to the kind of standard human calendar that we have developed, where we start with the 1st of January and we go by date and month, you can instead count your year depending on where you come from. Like if you come from Western society, then you can still count from the 1st of January, but then like if you come from the Vedic tradition, for example, and you want to count in terms of astrology, Vedic astrology, for example, you can count from April or whatever. Either way, so you set a starting point for the year or for the project or whatever you're working on that you need to observe through time and see the energy of through time. And you count just one by one every single day or every single unit of measurement of time of the thing that you're working on. So I'm just going to give the example of just literally going through your day-by-day life in a year. So this is where we need to go beyond the concept of just prime numbers. Because obviously when you're counting the days in a year, there's 365 days in a year. So that is 3 numbers, not just 1. So this is where, you know what, I'll just give you a very, very simple concept just for this particular application. The first number in a sequence is usually the general energy. So when we have just one number, when we just have a prime number, it just is what it is. Then when we have 2 numbers, so we don't just have, for example, the first day, but we have like the 19th day, then it is the energy and how it is done. So what it is coming through, how it is translated. So the second is, once again, a reflection on the first, as we have discussed. So there's like numerology and numerology. I hope that makes sense. Where the first number is what it is. The second is a reflection of that. A reflection on how is it coming to be? How does it attune and what attributes does it have in comparison to the rest of whatever? And then when we introduce the third number in a sequence, that is essentially the attitude that is good to have towards the process of the first 2. So once again, finding the compromise, as we discussed with the number 3. It is creating the stability through finding a perspective on the 2. So finding a perspective on the duality, looking at it in perspective. So we have a certain energy that is reflected through something, that transpires through something. And 3 is how we can or should or could react to it, how we can gain perspective and what energy would be good, for example, to attune to in order to coordinate the first 2. So in the numerological calendar, we don't just have the 7-day week, we go through basically 10-day cycles where we start with the first day, which is the 0, the energy of contraction, of the birthing, of, yeah, just essentially imagine like childbirth. Imagine it like a spring being squeezed together before the creation actually occurs. So that is usually at the day 0 or then like day 10 20, 30, 40, essentially anything that has the number of 0 in it will have this energy of the starting point, like before conception or deconception of something. Then the first day in a decade, so technically the second day, but the number one day in a decade is usually the energy of unfolding. So where at the level of 0, we were just preparing for something. At level, yeah, I'll just call it level 1 is where that something gets birthed. So that is usually, on these days, you get the energy of fast action, fast-paced thinking, of whatever was conceptualized on day 0, finally coming to fruition, being created, being actually birthed. So next in the decade, on days with the energy of number 2, is usually where we get the energy of chaos, you could say. So after something has been birthed, after we have acted upon something, after we had all of that quick thinking, quick motion, quick action, after that we get the, not the consequence of it yet, but we can see the other side. We face the larger repercussions of this expansion, of the action that we have taken. So we get the counterweight, the counterbalance of whatever has happened on the day under the number 1. So the day under the number 2 can also be attributed to the pendulum effect from the Hermetic principles. So once again, I think I've already attached the Hermetic principles in the previous video, but here you go, the Hermetic principles once again. Look it up, but I'm probably going to make a video on it. So as the pendulum effect states, when there is certain action, there has to be counteraction. So, you know, even beyond Hermetic principles, just basic laws of physics, right? To every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So that is where the chaos is created, is that we have acted in a certain way, and then there's a reaction to whatever we have started, initiated, whatever is going on. Then the days under the energy of the number 3 are the days where we accept whatever the chaos has been, where we find the middle ground, where we find the balance, where we find the trinity, where we find peace and unity within whatever chaos has occurred on the day under the number 2. So 3 are usually some of my favorite days because they're typically a lot more chill, and if something extremely chaotic happened on the day before, the number 3 days is where you can just be like, you know what, that was a lot, but I'll just let it blow over for now. It is what it is. I can accept it and just live in peace and mindfulness through it. And then after the day number 3, that is where we get the day number 4, which is the favorite days of mine, at least of mine, because the days under the number 4, right, it is a structure. And it is a structure in the sense of, you can imagine it like a light signal at a car stop, or whatever you call them, the light, you know, those like red, yellow, green light things, where usually on the 4th day of a decade is where you get into active communication with the universe. So after you have kind of seen the chaos unfold, you have accepted it, you then start receiving signals from the universe in your own energy and through your own self-reflection on whether what you're doing is good or bad, whether it is bringing you closer to flow or taking you further away from the flow. So the kind of red energies is where on the 4th day, if something is evoking anger within you, you get a lot of stop signs. You get everything telling you that no, this is not what is supposed to happen. You're going in the wrong direction, and you get a lot of obstacles in whatever endeavor you have just started. That is clearly a red sign, red signal. So that means stop, turn around, either do something else or change your perspective, change your attitude towards the actions that you're taking. Because through changing your attitude towards the particular endeavor that you have gone on, that is where you get to the kind of yellow light signal, where you're getting prepared, like the actual process of changing your attitude towards the situation, or changing your actions in the situation, changing your reactions to the situation, is what takes you to this kind of yellow light, yellow sign, where is this energy of like, okay, you know what, we're getting there, we're getting there. It's not that deep. You can change it. There is still potential. There's potential to still get the go-ahead in this matter. And then if you have successfully transmuted your energy, if you have successfully changed your actions or changed your attitudes towards the situation, that is where you get the green light, which is full go, full energy. Energy is just flowing, energy is just going. So if on the fourth day of a decade you get just everything flowing together, you don't get any obstacles, you don't get any issues in anything you're doing, that means that you're at the green light, and it means that carry on, you're blessed. Whatever actions you're taking are right for you right now. There still might be karma, you might still be doing something that is objectively in the concept of society you live in is totally wrong, but just for you, for your own high guidance, it is the right thing to do in that moment. And then it is up to what guidance you're actually pursuing. But the flow is there. Like the green light is the flow is there. And that is day number 4. I like days number 4. So days number 5, obviously, as we have discussed, the number 5 in itself are usually days for creativity. So after you have witnessed where you flow with the universe, where you're in sync, in synchronization, in the Tao of the universe, that is the points at which you are able to co-create with it. Those are the days where it is time to reflect on what has been working thus far and build on top of it, build something, create on top of it. So the number 5 days are creative days, also quite nice. I like them a lot as well. And then subsequently, number 6 days are the days where you let go of the ego, where you change your perspective, where you either take pride in what you have created on the day number 5, or you're letting go of pride, you're letting go of attachment. So yeah, once again, the energy of 6 is letting go of attachment, of expectations. So days under the number 6 can also bring some unexpected circumstances that might be the unexpected consequences of the actions on the previous days. But if you have utilized the energies correctly, then usually number 6 are just good days for reflection, for understanding, for becoming a bit more, taking pride in what you have done, taking pride in the work, but with a good sense of humility. Because if you approach the number 6 days with humility and gratitude towards whatever assistance you got from the universe in the previous days, on number 7 days is where you just get a lot of luck. Number 7 days also some of my favorite. It is usually, if you have been doing everything and going against the universe and doing everything wrong on the previous days, the number 7 days is usually where you get tips. You get pro tips from the universe, you get massive redirections. So if you have been going in the totally wrong direction, then number 7 days is where everything gets turned upside down. But if your direction has been like relatively good or mediocre, then number 7 days is where you just get more luck in whatever endeavor you were going on. And then the number 8 days are karmic days, where you get the consequences of your actions on the previous days. So also kind of similar to days with the attribute of the number 2, the days under the attribute of number 8 get a counterbalance kind of energy. So once again, because you have created some kind of karmic potential in your previous days, the days under the number 8 is where there is a counterbalance. So I'm essentially just spiraling around this whole concept of karma. You just get feedback, you get the returns from whatever investments you have created, from whatever you have been doing thus far. And then the number 9 days is where you kind of get the internal, you could say, the reflection of the consequences of what has unfolded. So the 8 is the actual physical manifestations of the consequences of whatever you have been doing. And then the number 9 days is where you can reflect upon those consequences to make better informed choices in the days that follow the number 9 days. So usually on days with the attribute of number 9, I like them as well, but they can be quite heavy because they are extremely useful in the sense of, if on that day you notice yourself feeling frustrated, if you feel tired, if you feel annoyed, if you feel like you're easily triggered, if you feel aggressive, then that usually means that everything that you have been doing thus far, you have been carrying the wrong attitude towards whatever actions you have been taking. So either the actions themselves have been wrong, or the attitude that you had towards the actions that you have taken, or towards the world around you, towards the universe, have been misguided, misdirected. And therefore, in the following decade, you should really try to act in a different way, have a different attitude towards situations. While if on these days you feel kind of not tired, but you just feel lazy, you feel like kind of the earth is trying to absorb you in, like you just feel like sleeping around, lounging around, like nothing can really trigger you. You feel like just nothing can touch you. or you just feel liberated, energized, you feel good, you feel like as soon as you start. So essentially, usually on days with the attribute of number 9, if you have been doing everything correctly and carrying the right attitude, if you're not doing anything, you will just kind of lay around and be lazy and will just have a good time to rest. But as soon as you start actually taking action on that day and decide to move forward and still carry on doing whatever you were doing, that is where you get like a lot of support on whatever it is you're doing, where everything just gets extra flow. Everything gets extra energy, but not like tense energy, but just like flowing, beautiful energy. So love number 9 days as well. And then after that whole cycle has been finished, that is where we get the day number 10 or 20, 30, 40, 50, so on and so forth. Because once again, the numerological year goes in decades. So days with the attribute of the number 10 are essentially similar to the days under the number 0, but in the sense of on top of having the attribute of the number 0, we also get the attribute of the number 1, 2, 3, or 4, whatever comes before that 0. And this is where you might want to go back to my explanation of how to read numerology with 2 or more symbols. I might do a whole separate video actually on this, on actually reading numerology with 2 or more symbols, because it is also a useful tool for actually reading signs from the universe in time, for example, in birth dates, in general, normal calendar dates, communicating with the universe through things like number plates, number signs all around you, because that is a whole art form of its own. But essentially, all you need to know for now is just the prime numbers and how they apply in a single decade. And then we will build on top of that in our later videos. And then if I also manage to, I will create a tool where I will actually tell you what the attributes of the day are, so that you can kind of get used to tracking the decade cycles yourself and get essentially guidance on what is the best attitude to carry in that day that you're going through. But so yeah, that has been the numerological application to your daily life, which is once again, in my opinion, one of the most helpful tools you can have, because then you can apply these same principles of counting days and decades on certain projects, endeavors, creative projects, on your relationships with other people even, as long as you actually keep track of the days, not just by calendar, but by the number of the day in itself, from the conception or from the beginning of whatever it is you have started. So I really hope that you found this video informative and helpful. And once again, I shall continue expanding on this topic, because numerology is probably one of my favorite things to explore, because it is so closely linked with science as well and has so much resonance with so many scientific disciplines. And it is, you know, math is really the core language that humans have found to communicate with the universe with. So whether you're a scientist or you're a spiritual person, that seems to be the kind of consensus that we all came to, that math is the way for us to communicate. So I shall continue expanding on this topic potentially, so that we can explore numerology and maybe even just like maths and geometry and stuff like that, and watch this turn into an educational, just like school channel. We just become a math channel instead of a spiritual, educational, holistic practice channel. We just do math. Wouldn't that be exciting? But now I'm too creative for that, so well, I'll consider it. I'll consider it. I'm not gonna make statements yet, but the perspective is there, is all I'm gonna say. Oh, and just postscriptum for a tip for you. When I upload this video, I'm going to put the number of the day on which it is uploaded in the description box below, so that if you haven't been using numerology to guide this year so far, counting from the 1st of January, I'm just going to write down which day it is that this video is uploaded on, so that you can start counting the days of the year from that point onwards until it is the 31st of December and the year starts over, and then we can get into the whole like flow of proper numerological updates hopefully by that point. But so yeah, for now, don't fear, there's not going to be too much maths yet. We'll get into it later, and just enjoy your day and collect this guidance and use it to your best.